Germany is developing a national security strategy for the first time. For critics, this is long overdue. They say that a lack of clear strategic thinking is now landing Germany in all sorts of problems, with dependencies on foreign hostile powers for energy and for its economy. But is Germany serious about making a change? I'm going to talk to the woman at the heart of the process, Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. Annalena Baerbock, many thanks for joining Deutsche Welle. I would like to begin with the war in Ukraine, which of course is the backdrop to developing Germany's new national security strategy. Your Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, has just said that Russia is expanding its focus from Donetsk and Luhansk in the east of the country to Kherson and other regions in the south. This seems to confirm the notion that Russia is aiming to annex these territories, perhaps even cut off Ukraine entirely from the Black Sea. What's your response to that?
Well, the same as it had been in the last months. We support Ukraine not only with solidarity, not only by mentioning every day that this is a fundamental breach of international law by Russia, but also with military support so they can self-defend their country, their territory. And Russia is using every time a different argument. So this time it's because of the military support they are saying, but they have been attacking Kiev and other parts of Ukraine before, so it's just a new propaganda from the Russian side.
And yet your government has been accused of simply not doing enough to help Ukraine fight back, despite promises of a turning point in Germany's attitude to security. According to the Kiel Institute, a German research institute, Germany is in 6th place in delivering weapons, behind the United States, behind Poland, behind the UK, Canada and Norway. Do you believe that Germany's responsibility to Ukraine is less than that of Norway?
Well, I don't know the figures yet. There are different figures in place if you calculate money or if you calculate the intensity for your weapon. But this is not a race of who's on which place in a ranking. This is about a common support from the whole international community, from NATO member states to support Ukraine. And this is why we combine our support also with others, because in some stocks we don't have everything. For example, we are delivering together with Netherlands howitzers. We are looking with some parts for munitions from others because we don't have the correct munition. And I think this is the strength of our support, that we don't do it in difference with other states, but that we combine our support. Everybody has to look where we can do more. We have the challenge, as many European states, that we have in our own stocks not everything Ukrainian is needing. This is why we are sending, for example, IRIS-T, one of the most advanced air missile defense systems, which is just in the production and is hopefully coming end of summer. And yes, we are always reconsidering what we can do more to support Ukraine more.
And yet you say that there's no looking at rankings, and yet Germany has been criticized, particularly by Eastern European neighbors and by Ukraine itself, for being behind other countries, to repeat, including Norway on the defense side. And to look at another measure measured by the Kiel Institute, financial contributions as a percentage of GDP, Germany is in 13th place there.
Well, I can just repeat myself. We are looking in different kinds of support, what we can do, also with support with investigations, with support of demining different cities, with support in medical aid, with support in refugees. Yes, if there are things where we can do more, also with direct finance grants, which we are currently discussing. We are also looking into this. But I'm sorry also for the arguments. There have been some arguments in the beginning which were right. We had to be faster. This is what we did all together. And when I was in Kiev lately, and also when the Chancellor was there, also from the government, they said, well, thank you for the support. Obviously, if you're in a time of war, everything has to be way faster. And this is why we reconsider why some of the deliveries takes longer, also with the backfilling, for example, which we are supposed to go together with the Poles. So I think also with regard to Poland, it's important that we work together and not against each other, because the backfilling from Germany and Poland only works if we do it together. And this is the effort I think we have to intensify.
Now, the war has exposed, of course, Germany's very severe dependency on Russian gas. We've been seeing that in particular this very week. When you launched the national security strategy process, you said you highlighted the issues of dependency. So I would like to look at another dependency that Germany has on China for its economy. This is one that could go very wrong, people are saying. Now, you are developing a new China strategy as part of this process. How serious are you about tackling and reducing this economic dependency on China?
Very serious. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense to make a strategy. If we're not serious about strategies, you shouldn't do one. So this is why we are looking intensively about our dependencies. But as we see also with Russia, some things you cannot cut from one day to the other. And there are similar questions for many European countries. For example, if we are going correctly now to electric cars to be in line with our climate goals, we need obviously batteries. We don't have a battery production as we need for our electric cars. Now we are starting one, but all the materials which are in the batteries, we have a dependency of 98%, and this counts for all the cars in Europe. So this is why our China strategy is also not an isolated German one, but because we are an integrated internal market, we are doing it in line with our European partners, with the EU Commission, who has also made very clear that China is not only a competitor in some of economic question, it's also a partner fighting the climate crisis, but also a system rival. And because it's a system rival, we have to make clear that nobody can blackmail us as we were with regard to our dependency to Russia. And this is the baseline for a new China strategy, working together where we can work together, but having also a sovereign European strategy of independence in critical infrastructure and especially in line with our foreign policy.
Well, let's pick up on cars. You mentioned the auto industry, which is so important to Germany. Now, Volkswagen has no fewer than 33 joint venture factories in China. BMW just started production at a new one last month. Mercedes has even got a new research and development center in China. Its two largest shareholders are from China. What happens to all of these investments if China, say, invades Taiwan?
Well, first of all, this is what we have to prevent, and this is why it's so important that the whole international community is in line with the United Nations General Assembly, saying that this fundamental breach of international law by Russia against Ukraine cannot be tolerated, because otherwise it would be an invitation to other countries like China to also invade Taiwan, or other countries who think they are a bigger neighbor of smaller countries. Secondly, we have to be prepared. We see it, as I said already before, with regard to our dependency in Russia. But I would like to underline, even though we had this dependency, even though, for example, myself, I've been always very critical with regard to Nord Stream 2. But even though we had this strong ties economic-wise, we took the sanctions we are taking right now. And this is something where I would like to underline also with regard to China or other parts of the world. Economic interest and values are no different parts of a coin. They are part of the same coin, because it's also in the interest of the German economy as well as in the European interest that other countries and also other companies have to be in line with our standards and values. And this is why we have this strong discussion about our dependency also in the car production side, as you have mentioned, with regard to China.
So do you think those investments, is Germany simply too exposed in its auto industry in China? Has German car companies simply gone too far there, do you think?
Well, we obviously have to reflect how our dependencies are, and German car companies are highly engaged in the China market. But on the other way around, I would also like to say this is not black and white. China is also very dependent from Europe, because also their export to the European market is very high. I mean, this is not a one-way street. This is in both directions.
Well, but
you shouldn't make us like smaller than we are, and I think this is our problem from the the past as Europeans, that we thought, okay, we just have to be silent because we're depending on others. No, we have to stand up for our values, we have to stand up for our interests and use our integrated market, which is one of the biggest worldwide.
But that was always the argument in favor of the energy relationship with Russia. People would always say, well, Russia needs Europe just as much as Europe needs Russia. That's obviously not true.
Well, because we had, with gas and others, some kind of dependencies. But we see already now why we are cutting all our economic ties to Russia. Well, obviously it hurts Russia very badly. But if you have a regime like in Russia right now, which doesn't care at all anymore about their economy, about the interest of their people, about their societies, obviously it's way easier for autocratic regimes to do whatever they want, because if they have any protest, they just bring people to jail, which we don't do in democracies. And this is not that sanctions don't have any results, but if there is somebody who says the war is above everything, obviously it doesn't stop him at this moment.
But just quickly to return to the question of Taiwan, have you worked through scenarios at the Foreign Ministry since you took over, since you became Foreign Minister, of a Chinese invasion?
Well, as I said, we are starting with our China strategy. Well, obviously, we are thinking also about different scenarios with Taiwan, but not isolated. We are doing this with our partners in the US. We are doing this with our NATO partners. We have just formulated a new NATO strategic concept saying that currently Russia is our biggest threat, but China might be our biggest threat in the future because also of its economic power. And this is why we have to be more resilient. This is why we have to have a strategic sovereignty as a European Union altogether, and again, not an isolated German one, because our power is the common EU power. We see this now with regard to Russia, and we will also see it in the future as a common China strategy from the European Union, where the German strategy is integrated.
And a very senior German figure in the European Union, Nicola Baer, Vice President of the European Parliament, has been in Taiwan this week. Do you support that trip?
Well, you want to nail me down now on single issues on Taiwan. I've just been in the region myself. I've been in Japan. I've discussed with Japanese, with our American friends over there, where different boats are lying also in the street of Taiwan. So obviously this is one of the very valuable parts of our security strategy, of our friends in the regions, and it's also in our own security interest. And this is why we have also different relationships. We have also a friendship group in the German Bundestag, which I've been a member in the past myself. So this is a common German and also a common EU strategy. And we have seen also with Lithuania, for example, when there was pressure because of the Taiwan issue, how important it is that European countries stand united together.
But do you support her visit?
I didn't even know that she was there. I'm sorry, I cannot comment on every trip.
Okay, but do you think it's in principle good for people of that stature to visit Taiwan?
Well, traveling is always good.
The coalition agreement frames this era of one of strategic rivalry, and you mentioned that with respect to China already, and a strategic competition between democracies on the one hand and autocracies like China and Russia on the other hand. At the moment, this is really playing out very much on the African continent, and we can see this in China's huge investments in infrastructure there. We can see that in Russian mercenaries going into Mali and crowding out German forces in Mali. Can you understand people on the African continent maybe not being too happy about their continent being used as a sort of battlefield between the great powers of the world?
Yes, definitely. No place on earth should be a battlefield for other powers.
But what we are seeing there is a systemic contest being played out between the United States, between the Europeans, between the Russians, between the Chinese. Is this not the case? And Germany is playing a part in that. We're beginning to see that also with the European Union's new investment plan.
No, because we have a total different approach than China or also Russia in this regard. We don't go to countries where we are not being invited, except in cases where there's fundamental breach of international law and where there's, for example, the question with regard to genocide or other forms, but this is then up to the United Nations to call on the international support, as we have seen in the past. With regard to Mali, for example, you were relating to Russian engagement. There's a United Nations mission, which is called MINUSMA. And this is with regards to even Mali saying, well, we need here protection for the development workers. We need protection here. That I've been there, talked to women who just wanted to go to the market and saying, we are afraid we cannot go there anymore because of the insecurity in our hometowns, in our home region. And I think this is very important for international community to don't close the eyes. But obviously, currently, the current transmission interim regime there is trying to make the work almost impossible from a United Nations mission in their own region, which is securing the security for civil work, for humanitarian work on the ground. And with other forms, I mean, I just have been at the Petersburg Climate Dialogue. There are so many countries in Africa, so many countries, also small island states, who say we want the investments with regard to climate change, energy transitions. And the question is what kind of agreements we are making. And I think it's like from eye to eye. This is not we are coming and looking down. This is cooperation investments we are offering. No deals where we say like China, okay, we invest. And if you cannot pay it back, we own the whole port, we own the whole infrastructure. But what we are, for example, saying with our energy investments, we help you to transform from diesel generators, for example, to solar panels, but together as a cooperative partnership.
You also talked in your speech announcing the strategy about a sort of values-driven foreign policy. The question is, has this not been undermined very much in the West by events of recent years? I was recently back from India when looking at the war in Ukraine, maybe people in India would be saying, well, how is that any worse than what the United States did in Iraq earlier this century? The United States wanted to dominate the Middle East. Putin wants to dominate Ukraine. Isn't it much the same?
A breach of international law is always wrong. Otherwise, we wouldn't have agreed on this international rules. And actually, this was the same argument the Chinese foreign minister used when I had the discussion with him. And I was underlying, well, this is why, for example, the German government with regard to Iraq said, we don't see the arguments and we are not participating. And this is why I called on China, for example. This is a moment from you to stand with international law and say, well, this Russian invasion in Ukraine is wrong. This is about politics. You can make your own decisions. It's up to us. It's in our responsibility. And in a time where you have to decide between justice and injustice, where you have to decide between defending civilians or supporting an aggressor, it's up to politicians, responsible politicians, to take a side. And as Desmond Tutu has correctly said already in the past, if you keep silent, you are taking the side of the oppressor.
Germany's third and last massive dependency is on the United States for its security. If you look ahead to the next election, how concerned are you that there could be a new president coming in who's not committed to NATO? What does that mean for Germany?
Well, I think the current moment shows how important strong transatlantic ties are. If we are defending together our freedom, our liberty, but especially our democracy, we are very strong. We are value partners. And this is why it was so important that also in the NATO strategic concept, we defined that this is not about military only. The NATO is not there for itself. The NATO is there to defend in times of war, democracy, freedom, human rights. And standing united in this is really the bottom of the new strategic concept of NATO. And at this moment, we have a strong alliance between the EU partners together with our American partners. And this is something we would like to build on also in the future. And this is why we are also addressing, for example, right now, when there are attacks also in the US on state institutions, on fundamental rights that we address, well, if you want to live up as democracies, you cannot be silent if you see these kind of attacks.
Just a very quick final thought, just to stand back from all of this. This is a big moment for Germany. It's never had a national security strategy. There's been criticism of Germany in the past, of being complacent, of being naive. What kind of a Germany do you want to see emerge from this crisis? What do you want to be the headlines about Germany's position on national security going forward?
Well, actually, if you're making politics only with looking for headlines, I think you are just putting a flag in the wind, as you would say in German language. I truly believe that every time has its answers. And when you look back for German foreign policy in the past, I am the lucky person, 40-year-old, that I could live my whole life in peace. Because foreign policy in Germany was successful in building trust with our neighbors after the horrible times of the Second World War, that we could build the EU together. And my country would have been never united again if there wouldn't be the European integration process. So the biggest security for Germany has been the European integration process. And now it's time to give this back to our friends and partners within Europe, that strong and careful but also Germany, which takes up its responsibility in solidarity with our partners, guarantees the peace project for Europe. And this is the bottom line for our security strategy. And this is why we have changed, for example, our defense policy. But living in peace is more than defense, it's more than diplomacy. It's also ensuring our democracy via, for example, intensifying our defense with regard to the digital world, with regard to fake news, or securing, we have the hottest day ever today here in my hometown, Hanover, 40 degrees in summer. Southern Europe is burning, so this is the third part of our national security strategy, the security with regard to our livelihood and the biggest threat, the climate crisis.
Annalena Baerbock, thank you very much for speaking to DW today.
Thanks a lot. All the best.